It's no secret that writing can be lonely work, but does it really have to be? Whether you're full-time, part-time, or just starting out, you'll get insights into the tricks, tips, and production habits of writers from every level of the biz. From best-selling authors to those launching their first novels, you're sure to be in the company of friends as we encourage great writers to divulge and share their secrets. This is the Great Writers Share podcast with your host, best-selling author, Daniel Wilcox.
Hello and welcome to the Great Writers Share podcast with me, Daniel Wilcox, where every week I hijack an hour or so of time from some of the kindest and hardest working writers around today to join me on the show and discuss everything that makes them tick, roar and bounce. Today's date, as of recording, is Monday the 27th of July, and I'll dive straight in with my personal update. So today was very, very exciting for me. We are achieving something of normality back in the UK, and by normality I mean if you take into account face masks and offensive amounts of hand sanitizer. So it was my first venture into town today where I was actually able to go to some of the cafes that are newly allowing you to sit in. And I'll be honest, it was absolutely awesome actually getting the chance to go back into an environment where I seem to work best just being out and around people, because as many of you guys obviously know, that writing can be very, very solitary. I say it in the intro to the show. But there's something about just being around other people that makes it, I don't know, it just eases that a little bit. So it was nice to go back to a little semblance of normality. And I've had a very productive day so far. I thought I'd stay in cafes all day, but I hit a little bit after lunchtime and was like, had enough. So I'm back at home now. But yeah, just having a bit of a change of scenery has really sort of lifted my spirits, I guess. And it's nice to know that hopefully we'll sort of keep opening and that will continue. Although obviously we have to be prepared for if everything shuts down again. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, it was really, really nice, and hats off to 200 Degrees and Costa for doing everything they can to make it as safe as possible for their customers. Not that they're sponsors of this show or anything. In fiction news, when this podcast goes live, When Winter Comes episode 3 will be live, completing the first 3 episodes of my long-running serialized novel. My long-running serialized novel. Let's try that. And yeah, I have no idea how it's going to perform so far. Hopefully people like it. The feedback I'm getting back from ARC readers is good. It's, it'll do whatever it does on the day that it comes out. So obviously by the time this episode airs, I'll have a bit of a hindsight on how the launch went, but it's ticking along. It's doing what I need it to do, and I'll be getting stuck into episode 4 with the view that it will now be a monthly release instead of once every fortnight, and we'll see how that goes. In non-fiction news, I haven't made any progress yet with the productivity book. I am just percolating on it and just reading a few other books at the minute to get a bit of a landscape of my own thinking, and just to see if there are any sort of familiar ideas or anything that I can boost my knowledge with before I actually start putting fingers to keyboard and making it happen. I am still aiming for something to come out by the end of this year, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I'm feeling good about it. I don't really want to rush it, which you can, I won't go to that side of things, but no, I'm not going to rush it, and I am looking forward to actually getting stuck in and making it happen. The weekly Great Writers Share tease, big changes are coming. Episode 50 is fast approaching, and I'll say no more this week. But I will also do a little add-on just for anyone who's looking to get more involved in the Great Writers Share community. Just because I've not shouted this out in a few weeks, check out the Facebook group for Great Writers Share, which is just facebook.com/groups/Great Writers Share, and also our Patreon, which I will announce or I will shout out a little bit later. Today's guest is the wonderful Iain Rob Wright, who is a horror author from Birmingham, so coming close to my neck of the woods. I last spoke to Iain back in 2017, I believe it was Christmas around 2017, on the Story Studio podcast, and it's really interesting. I love having the chance to catch up with authors and see what's happening, particularly those that have continued to make it work, continue to do great things. And I'm on Ian's newsletter list. I have been for years, and I love seeing his updates. So it was interesting getting to ask some of the questions that I had, to pick his brains a little bit, because he started his career way back in 2011, and he's been making it work since. He's had to go through all the different Amazon algorithm changes, everything else. He's dodged, dived, whatever the dodgeable D's are. Oh, Jesus. Dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. There we go. Everything that that Amazon has thrown at him, and he's managed to keep making it work. So we go a little bit into his history, a little bit into how he has managed to make it a sustainable career and how he continues to keep pushing forward, his attitude, anything that's changed over the last 3 years dramatically. We talk about how he has brought his partner into the business with him and some of the complications that may come with that, because I find that side of things fascinating, when you can actually take a romantic relationship and then turn that into a business relationship and not have one interfere with the other. I think there's massive lessons to be learned from that, because it's a very difficult thing to do. Not everyone is compatible in love and business, so they've managed to make it work, and we go into that. And we also talk a lot about Iain's attitude towards a mailing list and how he uses his as a central pillar of his business, which for people who have been in this game a while, I don't think that's going to be too rare a concept, but for anyone who's listening who is new into their author career, it's definitely something to watch out for. The Great Writer Share podcast is brought to you by all of our wonderful patrons over at www.patreon.com/greatwritershare, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get extra access to lots of great, fantastic bonus extra stuff. So we've got early access to ad-free episodes. You can get entry into our growing private Great Writer Share community, early access to the Great Writers Learn content, and so much more, particularly with the upcoming changes in a few weeks. I definitely advise that if you want to get on board now, because there's lots to come your way. And you get involved one more time at www.patreon.com/greatwritershare. And now, without any further ado, let's dive into the interview with the one and only Iain Rob Wright. One of horror's most respected authors, Iain Rob Wright is the writer of more than 20 books, many of them bestsellers. A previous Kindle All-Star and a mainstay in the horror charts, he is a prolific producer of unique and original stories. From his apocalyptic saga, The Gates, to his claustrophobic revenge thriller, ASBO, Iain writes across a broad spectrum of subgenres, creating both beloved series and standalone titles. With work available in several languages and in audio, Iain Rob Wright is one of the fastest rising stars in horror, but when not writing, he is a dedicated family man. Father to Jack and Molly and husband to Sally, he is often seen sharing his family memories with his fans on Facebook. Iain, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Daniel. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It sounds like you have coronavirus.
No, just not cleaning the house enough and just choking on my own dead skin cells, I think.
Oh yes, start off with some horror. I love it. So the last time we spoke was back in 2017. As with quite a few of my guests I've had return onto this show, the last time we spoke was during the Story Studio era, when you were interviewed by myself and Luke Condor. And I've gone back, I've re-listened to the interview, and you said a couple of things I just want to check back on 3 years later and see if things have changed. And the first one is, you said that last time it was harder to make money in publishing than it used to be. Are you still finding that that's the case in 2020?
It is still hard, but there are ways to make more money now. Before, I was earning less money and not really seeing a solution, whereas now kind of people have gotten over that dip and they're like, you know what you need to do now? You need to advertise, you need to be a bit more professional, you need to be a bit more business-like. And it was kind of the transition between the lucky days of Kindle, when you just threw something out there and it made you money, to right now there's big boys around, and to make money you need to compete. And so yeah, it's definitely still more difficult, but there's a roadmap now that you can follow. So it's less like just throwing spaghetti at the wall and you can go, right, I'm going to do a strategic plan, I'm going to do a business plan, I'm going to follow it. And, you know, hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel now for people that aren't getting sales or that don't know where to begin if they're just starting out. I think, 2011 when I did it, and this is true for a lot of authors like, Joanna Penn and Mark Dawson, both started in 2011 as well. And that seemed to be a key year where the 70% royalty came in, but then there was only about 300,000 books on the Kindle store. So it was so easy to make money. I wrote one shitty book, The Final Winter, which needed editing, and I've rewritten that book probably 3 times since. But back then, it wasn't a great book. It didn't have a great cover, and yet it replaced my income and allowed me to work full-time as an author. So that today is very unlikely to happen. I think today you've got to go, right, I want to be an author, I'm serious about it, I'm going to try hard, and I'm going to do it, the right way. And it takes a bit of effort and time now. It's still absolutely possible, and there's still a lot of new authors coming through and quitting their day jobs like yourself. You've quit more recently than some of the guys like me. So it's still definitely possible, but there's no quick fixes anymore. It's like any other business. It takes a lot of sort of time, effort, and a little sprinkling of luck.
Just to sprinkle a bit of context on your journey for my audience, are you okay just to give a little bit of an overview of your journey from sort of 2011 to now, and maybe some of the key markers that you've experienced along your way with some of your releases and maybe the changes on Kindle?
Yeah, well, I mean, serendipity got me where I am. I think if the situation that caused me to be a full-time author happened even 2 years later, it wouldn't have panned out the way it did. I was a phone salesman, sometimes a salesman, sometimes a manager, but I'd worked for Orange, Phones for You, a couple of others, and that had pretty much been what I'd been doing since I'd left college. I was at university, but I spent all my money on booze, and I ended up quitting after a year and things. And this was the University of Birmingham, so it's a good university as well. But I was just a bit of a mess. So I started being a full-time phone salesman. I was earning quite good money. And this was back when mobile phones were pretty new in the UK. So pretty much everyone through the door came in and didn't have a mobile phone, and you could sell them one. So I made a mistake when I was young by following money instead of what I actually wanted to do. So I started out on Orange, and I was making, a couple of grand a month as a teenager, and it was great. And I quit university because I wanted to be an English teacher and things. And I did 1 year, and then that was it. Thought phones were great. I thought I was going to be a manager, and that was my career. A few years down the line, I was miserable. I hated it. Everybody had a mobile phone, which meant everybody through the door, you had to basically scam them. You had to try and get them to cancel their contract with T-Mobile and get them to come to Three. And it got really nasty and really sort of dog-eat-dog. And, I was in a position where I was being forced to sell insurance to old ladies, and I just hated it. And the managers were under stress, so they started becoming complete tosspots, and area managers were only interested in their bonuses, which, in Phones for You, the area manager bonus was 50 grand a year on top of their 50. So if you messed with their bonus, they would, make your life hell. And I was absolutely miserable. I was also suffering with generalised anxiety disorder at the time, which I didn't know I had. I just thought I was a bit of a mess. I was with my current partner, who's now my wife, but back then our relationship was just all over the place because I was a bit of an insecure, jealous freak, and basically I was at the worst point of my life. And I was pretty close to a nervous breakdown, I'd say, and the light at the end of the tunnel for me, and at the time it was a pipe dream, and I was completely naive and kidding myself, but I was writing a book in my spare time, and I'd always wanted to be an author. I was like, I'm going to be an author, I can't do phones anymore. One day a manager at Three pushed me a bit too hard, and I just walked out, said I'm done. I'm like, fuck it. I came home, my wife was like, well, she was my girlfriend then, but I was living at her house, and she was like, why, you've just quit your job like that, like where are we going to get money from and stuff? So she was really angry, but she was successful. She could kind of afford to pay the bill. So she said, like, you keep going on about this bloody book. What are you going to do? You're going to send it off to agents and all that? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Honestly, if I haven't got a job in 6 months, I'll go back into the phone industry. I can walk into any phone industry job, which I could because of my experience and things. And sort of it was musical chairs at the phone shops because people were always coming and going. So she gave me 6 months, and I was like, okay, that's fine. 6 months, I promise. I'll get this book published. I'm going to send it to every agent, which, I did. And I spent weeks doing these, really repetitive letters and things like that and sending it off. I had the Writers and Artists Handbook, which she was supposed to get. So I went through all the, the traditional garbage. And in the meantime, I don't know how I came about it, but I became aware of KDP Online because I was so desperate and miserable and probably drunk most of the time as well at that point. I just went for it. I thought this is probably going to hurt me because if I put it online, then nobody's going to publish it for me. So I kind of thought, I'm taking the shortcut that's easy and I shouldn't be doing it, but I'm desperate. So I put it on KDP. And then the first month it made me, I think, 16 quid. And this was the May. And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of, it was kind of amazing because that 16 quid came from strangers. And then there was a couple of strangers on Facebook who were talking to me, and then I got a couple of reviews, and it was a big buzz. The next month I did 54 quid, I think. And I was like, well, look, that's gone up. At least I'm earning something now. It's not nothing. And my girlfriend was like, yeah, okay. you've got a little bit to catch up on the 2 grand a month you're earning. So, and then the next month it did over 100. And then at month 6 it did about 1,1600 quid, which was more or less what I was earning as a salesman after tax. So I was like, fucking done it. I said, give me 6 months. It's month 6. I've come in at the wire and I've done it. I've replaced my income. About 6 months after that, I had a $5,000 month, and we went out and brought a new sofa and a massive telly. And it was kind of like pinching myself. And I was like, this can't be happening. I've got one book out. Actually, the $5,000 came when I released my second book. So I had 2 books out and I did a $5,000. And up until that point, that was stupid, crazy money. I'd never earned. The most I'd ever earned in my life was probably $2,500, $3,000 during a Christmas month, you know, as a manager at Fame TV, probably. So having $5,000 come to me, it was just like, it completely changed my worldview, because I didn't even understand you could have that amount of money in your hand. So yeah, it was kind of up and down for a bit, but my wife had a really good job. She had a family business, and you know, her earnings were good, and they were always the same, so we could kind of rely on that. And it gave me the breathing room to just kind of go for it. And you know, that was 2011, and I've never worked for anyone since. And generally, with a few exceptions, every year I've earned more than the previous year. A couple of years ago, there was a couple of exceptions, and then I found out about, you know, Facebook advertising back when that worked really fucking well. And then I had a crazy bloody year when I was doing like $20,000 a month. So I went from like a bit of a bad year to suddenly go, whoa! And then that was like, you know, I've got Mercedes parts on the drive. I live in a 5-bedroom house and shit. But then the sales went down again, so now I'm in a 5-bedroom house with a Mercedes, and I'm not earning that money. So I'm like,
yeah.
So it's up and down. It's you have good times and bad times, but generally I'm blessed, and that, you know, I never thought my life would be anywhere close to where it is. And the thing that's worth more than all the money is just the freedom. You know, we've had this coronavirus. My wife isn't stuck at home suffering with the kids while I'm off working. You know, I'm at home. We're doing it together. We're both giving each other breaks. My wife quit her career to work with me doing, you know, she does my paperbacks and Ingram Sparks and my website things. So it's so fantastic that we're all together as a family all the time. We make our own sort of hours. We do what we want to do. You know, tomorrow, like I said to you earlier before the interview, we're going to the zoo. You know, it's a Friday. Everybody else will be at work, but you know, we're going to the zoo. So that's worth more than anything. And if my wages drop to a point where I'm only just about scraping by, I'm still so much more blessed than doing a job where I'm earning more, but I'm miserable.
Yeah. Do you ever, like you say, because there's a lot of ups and downs along the way, you know, you have these highs where you think everything's going to be okay and just it's never going to fall, and then it does come back down. Are there ever any points where you stop and you go, maybe I should consider something more stable? Are you solidly now on the, this is my future, this is what I'm doing?
We're in a bit of a point now where my wife's the one that has to have that on her mind, because at the moment my income's good enough to support us both. And she helps with the business and keeps that income up there. But if income from the book starts to fall, then the dagger starts to kind of hang over her head, and she has to like go and get a job, because what I'm earning as an author is so much more than I'd earn doing anything else, because I'm not qualified. I don't really have any experience other than a bit of sales and stuff. So for me, my earnings would have to go so low to be at a point where it would be better to get a job elsewhere. Whereas for my wife, you know, she was a managing director and she could get a high-paid job, so she's the one that's kind of more vulnerable to that. But there's been probably twice over the last sort of 9-10 years when it's looked like, okay, the dream might be coming to an end now. I've had a run of it, and you know, sales have gone really bad, and I'm still really blessed, because when I talk about having really bad months, really, you know, those 2 dips that almost forced me to contemplate work elsewhere, those were still sort of $2,500, 3 months. And I know I have to remind myself that for a lot of authors, that would be, you know, a dream come true to earn that from book sales. So I have to keep it in perspective that kind of a bad year for me is only bad in relation to sort of what I've been doing. So you have to kind of keep yourself grounded and go, you know what, as long as we're paying the bills, I'm so lucky to do this. Yeah, there's definitely been a couple of times when it's looked dire, and that's a key to me still being around, because I know there's some guys that started off with me that they're not full time anymore, or they're not even doing it. They've moved on to other things. And for me, I've always managed to come back, because I always keep going until I find what works. And in the early days, that used to be experimentation and kind of being a bit of a trendsetter myself, but I've totally been kind of left behind now. I'm not one of the guys that can give out advice that nobody else knows, which I was doing a lot at the beginning. I'm very much a follower now, but I know the guys to follow. So for me, Mark Dawson turned it around for me with his Facebook course, because I was coming off one of the back of off the back of one of my worst years, and I was desperate and looking for a solution, and I found Mark's Facebook course. And as I said, the next year was the best year I've ever had. So there's always some key you can find that will unlock, the sales and the growth. But the market never stays static. So what you've got 1 minute won't work forever. And Facebook ads, while I still use them, they're not, the money spinners that they were for me. They're just kind of keeping me consistent now and keeping me from falling. But, I'm still always on the search for the next big thing. And while that used to be something I could find out on my own, it's the market's evolved so much now that you've got, you want to follow the experts that, spent 10 years in marketing or they're IT, geniuses that work out some sort of algorithm. These are the people that I follow now because they're the ones that think outside the box and they kind of create their own success. And then, luckily, if you're getting quick enough, you can kind of ride their wave.
Absolutely. And you're now at a point where, like we said in the intro, you've got a fair host of books behind your name now. You've got well over 20 novels and a couple of different series as well. I do want to get a bit probably niche into this topic because there's a lot of stuff that I want to learn from you. And one of those is that you're making quite good money by writing a lot of standalones, which seems to be contrary to a lot of the common advice that you get nowadays. And I understand that with horror, it's difficult or more difficult to serialize. But what is your strategy when it comes to writing and releasing horror at the minute?
Honestly, if I had the choice, 90% of what I write would probably be standalones. That's what I personally enjoy writing. And I'd very much, if it was down to me, I'd be very much like Stephen King and I'd write big, fat standalones. The reason I don't is sort of the market economics because, as you say, that's kind of contrary to what breeds success for most people. So there's been a couple of times when I've written for the market rather than for myself. The first time was when KU first came around, Kindle Unlimited, and it favoured sort of downloads quantity over quality. So if somebody downloaded your book, I forget now, you got like 25p or something, and you get that every single time you had a book downloaded, whether it was a 100,000 word novel or a 25-page short story, you get paid the same. And straight away you had all these authors with shorter works were suddenly doing better. And they started, you get short stories spammed everywhere and things like that. So I was forced, because my income literally halved about 50%. Well, obviously half is 50%. So my income halved pretty much overnight with Kindle Unlimited when it first came about. So I was forced to start writing short stories to kind of game the system. And while I didn't like doing it, I had no choice really, because I was already too deep in the rabbit hole in that this was my career and it's how I was keeping a roof over my head. So I had to make the money rather than just do what I wanted to do. So I wrote a load of short stories, and that's how the A to Z of horror came about. It was actually 26 standalone stories just to game the system, to get those download numbers rather than actual sort of quality purchases. Then they changed it to Kindle Unlimited 2.0, where they then started doing it per page, which meant that straight away people that wrote good long books that people read all the way to the end were the ones making the money, which is a far better system. I went back to writing novels. So that's one time that I wrote for market. And then the second was starting to write series, which I don't really want to do. I find it really hard to keep previous books in my head and characters, and I find that rather than a story coming to me and me writing it because I've got that in my head and I want to get it out, I find that writing a series is very much more cerebral, in that you have to think about what you're going to write. You go, right, what am I going to do in the next book? And I don't find that as much fun as just going, right, I really want to write about this and I'm going to sit down and do it.
Yeah.
So I don't get as much pleasure from series, and it is more difficult because you've got so many plot threads. But I wrote the 6 books in the Hell on Earth series, which I've just concluded this week with the release of Rebirth.
Yes, I got that update. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And it does make more money, and there was a time when I could make profit on a single book on Facebook ads. So I'd advertise The Final Winter at $4.99, and I'd make, probably 30% profit. So I'd spend £1, I'd make £1.30 back in royalties. So I could write standalones and just advertise standalones. But now that it's so hard to just make direct profit like that. So you've got to do the thing with read through, which is the sort of the hot take at the moment, is read through and calculate your read through and do a series. So you advertise book 1 a load and you hope that people read the next 5, and then that's how you make your money, sort of further down the line. one thing that's never sort of really changed for me in the last few years is mailing list sign up. So those will always grow your business. So if you can grow your mailing list, you'll grow kind of your sales base, and that gives you stability that I never had in the earlier years of my career. So I definitely recommend a mailing list. And yeah, so for me, the current strategy is to probably write 1 or maybe 2 series and then release 1 or 2 standalones a year, which I have to do for my own sort of sanity and a break. And I get really excited when I'm about to write a standalone. But like you said, contrary to sort of common belief, my standalones have done really well. So the room upstairs is sold really well, and it's only just started to kind of descend into sort of lower sales, but it had a good sort of 4 or 5 months of really sort of caning sales. So if you really do want to do standalones, do it, because you don't want to burn out. So if you want to do that, then that's what you should do, and just accept that you might not make as much money as you might do doing series, but it's all about balance.
How do you serialize horror? Because from a lot of what I've been looking into, and obviously that I'm serializing my novel at the minute, When Winter Comes. It seems to be a very, very difficult thing to try and manage, because obviously in horror a lot of people die, and what I have seen is that in the horror charts there are a lot of series with I would argue are horror sub genres. And there's a lot of urban fantasy, there's a lot of thriller that have sort of the horror edge, but there's not, from what I can see, many horror series, like just pure horror series. How do you approach that?
It pisses me off, and it pisses off a lot of horror authors, to be honest.
The horror charts are a mess at the minute.
Yeah, and it's nearly all paranormal romance and things. The reason authors do it is because horror is quite a small pool, really, relatively speaking, compared to romance and thrillers and things. So if you've got authors that have got no chance of getting, number 1 in the paranormal romance or the erotica or anything like that, they go, right, what's a smaller chart that I can try and dominate? And, they'll go for horror or something like that. And because sort of romance and erotica is such a huge genre that even a relatively unsuccessful romance author can probably get in the horror charts, because they're a small fish in a huge pond, whereas in horror, we're a small pond full of kind of big fishes all trying to make it. So the horror chart gets abused a lot, and it does annoy me. It's hard to do a horror series in some respects, because generally you want the bad guy to die at the end, because that's the catharsis of the horror novel. Apocalyptic tends to be a lot easier, because obviously that's world spanning. You can pick up and drop characters from any part of the world, and they're all going through the same sort of crisis, and you find that a lot of the series in horror tend to be apocalyptic. I haven't seen it personally, but I think a good sort of way to do a series would be like Jason, Halloween type thing, where you keep bringing the bad guy back, so you could do it that way. And I mean, for myself, I kind of go for a bit of an in-between sometimes, in that all my standalones are linked. They all have plot threads that go throughout. And once my readers learn that, that makes them very eager to go for my other books to see if they can find these little Easter eggs and plot threads.
I've seen that quite commonly in thrillers.
Yeah, and I think I kind of copied that from Brian Keane, who kind of links a lot of his Labyrinth books together. And J.A. Conrath does it a bit as well, and Joe's a friend of mine and things. So I definitely stole that thing, and I know Stephen King kind of retconned it into his work later on, and then linked it all with the Dark Tower. So I think that's a good way. If you don't want to write series, you can kind of add that appeal to your standalones. But I mean, really, it's simple to do a series and get people to read through. You write a book. The key is you have to make the book feel self-contained. So there needs to be kind of a book level story that you complete and you provide answers for. And then there just needs to be a background story that overarcs. So if you just write a story and leave it hanging, people get really pissed off at you and you'll get bad reviews. So you have to kind of make each book a standalone story of its own. So you have to kind of introduce maybe a monster of the week that gets dealt with in that one book. Then you've got sort of the overarching big story behind it, and you just end every book with get book 2 now or pre-order book 2 now, and you kind of just keep them on the line like that. But the important thing is you don't leave them unsatisfied by the fact that there's another book they need to read. You've got to make each book kind of stand on its own feet and work on its own merits. Otherwise, you're going to end up pissing people off.
When you talk about writing horror apocalyptic books, what kind of post-apocalyptic scenario are we looking at there? Is it primarily your typical EMP? Is it, virus based? Is there what's the sort of string there that makes it horror as opposed to just a general apocalyptic?
I think an apocalyptic scenario in itself is horrible. So I don't think you can have an apocalypse without the horror embedded. Hold on, my daughter's just walked in. Oh, darling. Oh no, it's your bunny. Can you go see mummy? Can you go see mummy? Because I'm just working at the moment. All right, look at you. So yeah, I think the genres are entwined, and you can't unentwine them. And I think what we fear, what makes horror is having our senses and our comforts taken away from us. So if we're stuck in a deep dark wood, we can't see properly. We're in an environment we're not used to. Sort of we can hear things that we can't locate, and that's the horror of being stuck in a deep dark wood comes from the disorientation and sort of discomfort of not being in our natural environment, one we're used to and that we're safe in. And I think apocalyptic fiction kind of entails that very same thing. It's all about losing the comforts of our modern living. And not getting food and warmth and sorry, my daughter's at the door again. All right, I'll speak to you in a minute, all right, sweetheart, love you. So yeah, I mean it is horror. It's all about sort of taking away the things that make us feel safe, and forcing us to kind of confront our inner strengths that we might not know are there, and force us to confront our weaknesses, So horror is very much about deprivation. I think it's about depriving a person of something they rely on, and then it's watching, how much of their inner strength they can find to kind of vanquish the obstacle that's, it's very much, people always say that horror, is a bit of a disturbed genre, and how do you come up with these ideas? But I find it the most uplifting genre, because I think it's always about finding our inner strength and overcoming things that we're afraid of, and it's very much good overcoming evil, 9 times out of 10. So it's very cathartic, it's very uplifting, and I think that horror is all about hope. It's all about, we might be at our lowest ebb, but we can always kind of come back from the very worst. So it's an allegory for many things in our life, and many horror films are metaphors for parts of life like alcohol and teenage sex, and all those things. It's to kind of put things in perspective for us. And nothing does that more than sort of an apocalyptic scenario where everything we take for granted, is taken away from us, and we learn just how much we're like animals when you par everything back. And we're even less capable really than an animal in the wild that would thrive in an apocalyptic scenario. So I think apocalyptic fiction is horror. It's just under a different name, and it's a certain scenario.
Yeah, it's definitely given me a bit to think about, because like I say, I'm looking at ways to make more series of horror, and that has been a path that I've looked at going down. But I've written post-apocalyptic before. I've got the Rot series that I've written with Luke, and that when we were writing it, I guess the difference there between those books and what I'd probably go on and write now is those books were written with a post-apocalyptic in mind, so it was more catered towards a traditional post-apoc audience with a bit of a horror lilt, as opposed to encompassing that horror from the start and really writing in a style that is more representative of the horror genre itself. So that might be a way to go.
Yeah, and I think at the moment serialization is a good way to go, because I think in this day and age we're competing with so many other media, and people's time is short, and I think it's a very small section of society that's willing to read a Stephen King doorstop or a Ken Follett historical novel. People just don't have the time or the inclination. So I kind of think fiction is heading towards a shorter, more regular release schedule anyway. People, it's Amazon, Prime. We want it now. We want it. We want it right away. We don't want to wait. I'm not willing to deal with the old traditional publishing system of, Stephen King releases a book every 18 months. People aren't willing to do that anymore. That if they like an author and they like what they're reading, they want it now. And I think they would prefer 5 30,000 word books that they can get every 3 months than waiting 2 years for one massive doorstop. So I think that's the way the market's going to go, and I think that serves the emerging audience of people that have grown up with iPads and things, and that might be able to read 10 minutes on the train here and there, and they don't want to really have to invest themselves in a book. And while there's still certainly an audience there, I mean, I love Game of Thrones and sort of I really love epic fantasy, so I'm perfectly willing to sort of commit that time, but then I read daily, and I love to read. It's one of my my biggest joys. But a lot of people, reading's a lot less of an inclination for them, and they might do it a lot less often. So then they might only have a week on a holiday and they want to get a couple of books in. So I think short fiction, it's definitely viable, and I think because of the way Amazon's algorithms work, where they favour books in the first 3 months as hot new releases and things, I think the smartest current way for an author to make a living is to try and get a book out every 3 months. And if that means you have to write shorter, then that's good that the two things kind of work together, that you can get away with writing something shorter. You're not going to get bad reviews like you might have done 20 years ago in the normal publishing sector, where people have paid £9 for a paperback and they want their value. You can charge 9 for a short book if you want, and people aren't going to feel shortchanged.
What would you say to a fledgling horror writer who's thinking, okay, I want to start getting into this business, I want to see if I can make it as an author, start making money through Amazon, through whatever means. If you were to start over again, what advice would you give to that author?
Do it, get started. If you wait a year to get started, then that's an extra year it's going to take you to get anywhere. So do it. Make your first book as good as you can make it. If you've got some savings, get it edited properly and get a proper cover. But if you can't, still get it out there, because if it earns you a tenner a month and you invest that tenner a month in getting the things that you need to make it better, you can keep rewriting it if you need. If you write a book and you get 1 good review and 10 bad reviews, don't pay attention to the good review, pay attention to the 10 bad ones. See what people are criticising you for and address it. I certainly do that. I pay a lot more attention to my bad reviews, possibly because they're so rare. But I've definitely learnt from my bad reviews. Early on, I got slated for mixing up British slang with American slang, and I was a complete mess. And because I read so much American fiction and watch so much American TV, and I kind of pictured an American audience that I was writing for, I was saying trash and elevator.
Oh, I'm so in your situation right now. I'm so there.
You put it in the trunk of the car and stuff, and I got slated for it. And at first, I thought if I write too British, then it's going to turn the Americans off. They won't have any time to learn all the crappy sayings I'm coming out with, but they love it. My American readers, they almost, they all come back to me and they've looked it up on a dictionary or they've looked it up online and they've learnt the words, and they really love learning sort of British sayings and things. And then I also have British readers who love the fact that, I might have set a scene in bloody Tipton or something. It pleases both audiences. So definitely just don't try and be anything but what you are. If you want to write a certain way and you speak a certain way, and you're working class, you're middle class, you're aristocracy, whatever, write who you are. And I very much learned that lesson after a few books, that I grew up poor in a council estate. I don't speak posh. I swear a lot. I got involved in booze and crime and things when I was a teenager, and while I've come through that and like to think I've atoned for my past sins, that's very much part of who I am, so I don't hide that. And I suppose my image of an author when I started was very, a middle class whiskey drinker with a cigar in a mahogany office in a big country house. I didn't think a kid from a council estate could write books that were authoritative enough for people to read. That I always felt that people would look down on anything that I had to say, but it's absolutely the inverse is true. If anything, people enjoy the fact that I do have an understanding of the working class. I'm not just writing them as a sort of a a viewer. I've actually, I've been working class and I'm now middle class, and I'm not kind of mocking either side.
That solves so many of our problems. I released a novella last year, and I literally had that thing where I was like, most of my audience are American. I'll try and cater it towards the American audience. And I did just get picked up on people that just like, you've not used this right. And, this stands out. And, is it UK or US? And the stuff I've written since has all just been, no, I'm focusing on UK because that's what I know. That's what I'm good at. And then it seems to have been more well received. Yeah. So that's a problem solved. You mentioned J.A. Conrath earlier, and obviously he's a blurb on a lot of your books. And last time we spoke, again back in 2017, you mentioned that you'd dabbled in some collaborations, but it wasn't something that you'd feel that you'd probably pick up again. Yet in the last few months, you have released a couple of books again with J.A. Conrath. I didn't know if you wanted to speak a little bit to that and what might have changed to make you think about collaboration again.
I haven't. We've re-released the previous 2 books that we wrote together because they were published through an agency, and now they're published directly by Joe through Book Rabbit, I think it's called.
Book Rabbit.
We've re-released the books, but we haven't written anything new. Funnily enough, last year, and I hope these 2 guys won't mind me mentioning them, but we were actually, I was writing a book with 2 other authors, Bobby Adair and T.W. Piperbrook, both authors, and we were going to write an artificial intelligence apocalypse story.
Amazing.
We kind of made a little bit of headway, and then one of us had to drop out, unfortunately, due to some personal issues, and it kind of got abandoned. And T.W. Piperbrook was actually a replacement for an initial author that also dropped out, so it kind of turned into, look, this just isn't happening, is it? And that's part of the problem. It's difficult working with other people. And for me, I'm not really a people person, and I don't mean that misanthropic. I'm not unfriendly or anything like that. And if you meet me in the street, by all means, say hello and I'll have a chat. But I like being at home. I like working in my own world, in my own set way. I don't really like having to do things other people's ways, and I don't want to work with other people and have to change. I'm very set in my ways, and I suppose because I have the luxury of doing that, I don't really want to do anything but sit at my computer, write what I want to write, how I want to write, when I want to write it, release it when I want to write it. And for me, it's just adds a lot of stress that I don't want working with other authors. And in recent years, I've pared down anything extracurricular. I closed down the self-publishing course I was doing, and I was going to do merchandise and things, and it was all making me miserable. It was all making me stressed. And I just thought, you know what? The thing I really enjoy is writing books, and that's what my audience actually want me to do. So I'm going to do that, and I've been a lot happier since. And whilst I still have to do a lot of marketing with advertising and things, it's great that I've got my wife Sally to do my website and to do get the paperbacks formatted and stuff, because I just, all I want to do is write, because anything else just stresses me and makes me miserable. So I mean, when I say I'm not a people person, I just I like being in my own head, and I'm very much my best friend is my wife, and I love being around my wife and my kids, and rarely do I need anything more than that. So for me, I can completely live on a desert island with just those people and be fine. So, but then you've got guys like Matt Shaw, who's a good friend of mine. Like, he is a social butterfly. He hardly ever, he's met everybody. He's been all over the world for a 10-minute meeting, and he's the complete opposite of me. So, it depends on who you are as a person. And the great thing about being an author is it allows you to do what you want to do. Matt Shaw going into films, and he's used it as a platform to do exactly what he wants to do with his life. And for me, the opposite is true. The less I have to do with the outside world, the better. Which is why you won't see me really at conventions and things like that. And I don't do public book signings and stuff, because I find it, well, no offence to people like Matt, but I kind of find it vanity over sanity. For me, I went to Cardiff to do a book signing with Matt Shaw at a Comic-Con a few years back, and it ended up costing me more than I made because of hotels and travel and things. And I just thought, well, it was great to meet everybody. I've missed a weekend being with my son, who was like a baby at the time and stuff. And I just thought, maybe when my kids are older, I might get about a bit more. But at the moment, I speak to people online a lot, and I do try to be there for my fans and readers and that, but generally I like to be in the house or at the zoo with the kids.
What was the process like bringing your wife into the business?
It was difficult, to be honest, and I think my wife's business got purchased by a large conglomerate, and they kept her on as a managing director, and she didn't make a fortune or anything like that. The business wasn't worth anything because it was struggling. So she kind of just went from owning her own business to kind of still being in charge of that business but working for somebody else. And that kind of, it just, it didn't work and it wasn't going to work. She wasn't happy. She didn't like, this business she'd run for 10 years being managed in ways she didn't agree with, but then she also appreciated the fact that it wasn't her business anymore. So eventually she left, and she kind of toyed with helping me out, but then it was kind of like, does she do something else? Does she start a new business and things like that? And if you ever want to start a business, try coming up with a bloody idea, because it is impossible. We spent probably a whole year just trying to think, what could we do to make money? And everything's done. And any business you can think of, it's so difficult because everything's already out there. So unless you're in IT and you can invent some brilliant machine, or it's so difficult nowadays. So that kind of went out the window. And then she was going to be a slimming world consultant, and but then you find out the truth behind that business model, and you're like, yeah, it isn't actually making money for anybody but Slimming World. So she was kind of like, well, I really do want to do the business with you, Iain, because it'd be great to work together on things. And the biggest problem was, but at that point, I had 10 years of knowledge of learning things, because you do learn things constantly in this job. So I knew how to set up a website, I knew how to use Photoshop, I knew how to do Facebook ads, and trying to explain that stuff is so difficult that it did end up making her feel quite, I suppose, insecure and things. And it was also really difficult for me to go from 10 years doing everything myself to relinquishing. So there was definitely issues with it. And I think it came to a head and we had a big blowout about it, a big argument. But then after that, it's been fine. And I think she was in a position where she wasn't respecting the 10 years I'd put into this business, and felt I was talking down to all the time. And I also wasn't respecting the fact that I needed to kind of let her off the reins and go. So once we had a blowout at each other, it's been fine ever since. And it's great. We've got desks next to each other. And she does all the stuff that I don't want to do, all the stuff that takes me away from sort of writing, but then that tends to be the stuff she loves. So it works really well. And a lot of people go, oh God, how can you stand working with your partner and being with her 24 hours a day? But then it's like, because I married my best friend, because I married the person I like being around the most. I mean, isn't that the point? I can't understand why you'd marry someone that you don't want to be with all the time. It's like, I wouldn't have married her otherwise. I'd have found someone that I did like being with. So for me, yeah, it's great. We have lunch together. We walk and get the kids from the school around the corner together at sort of 3:30. And yeah, I wouldn't change it for the world. And to be honest, we're a lot poorer since she left her kind of massively paid, powerful managing director role. She earned a lot of money. And it took probably a year for her to quit because we were so frightened of giving up all that money. And I can't say we've regretted it once. It's been the best thing we ever did, because she now has that same freedom that I have, and we're truly free now in that we don't have bosses, we don't have 9 to 5, we take holidays whenever we want. We're always there for the kids. We don't miss a thing, and that's, that makes me feel even more blessed, because I managed to create a business not just for me now, but for my wife, and we're both free. And again, that's why it might be hard, but if you want to be an author, then do it today. Don't wait. Don't doubt yourself. Even if your book's not that great, you've got to start. Just get it out there. If you get bad reviews, read the bad reviews, fix it. Write book 2 and make it better. Write book 3 and make that better. Start a mailing list and start adding people. It might take you 10 years. It might take you 1 year. That might depend on how good an author you are, but it's not magic. And I know a lot of authors would like you to think that there's some sort of superior being that has a God-given talent that can't be learned. But it is a job. I'm twice the author I was 10 years ago because I've learned to be, because I've learned how to write properly, and because editors have helped me and things. And probably not everybody can be an author, but I think if somebody wants to be an author, then that means they've probably got the thing in them that means they can do it because they want to be one. So do it. Don't doubt. Don't worry about it being hard. Don't feel like a fraud and that you've got no right to be here, because all that's in the past. All that bullshit is gone. You don't need anyone's permission anymore. If you want to tell a story and try and sell it to people, do it. If you make £5 a year, so what? You've made money. From something you love. So just do it, because if it works for you, like it has for me and a lot of other authors, it's just, you are truly blessed. It's like winning the lottery of jobs.
No, that's absolutely right. I totally agree with that. I remember the first real money I made off of writing, I was doing, it was a weird blog, and I won't go into the intricacies of it, but it basically involved cryptocurrency earning through blogging and people upvoting. I managed to basically just from a week of blogging make £300 on this site through different cryptocurrencies and stuff. And part of me was like, it's cryptocurrency, I'll never get it. But then I found ways to convert that into real cash, and I drew that out and I was like, oh my God, like particularly when you're working a job and like you say, you've got that benchmark money you're earning anyway, anything above that is amazing. So it could be 5, it could be 10 quid. The fact that you've actually made money just from putting words out there is a real boost to push you forward. I remember taking, I think, like about 300 quid, and I took a big chunk of that. And at the time, I gave my partner at the time, bought her a cake mixer because she was massively into baking. I've never felt like, the biggest, a bigger man since, because it's like, I bought this money and this is for you. This is made of writer money. Go make cake. So it's quite a big moment. But yeah, there's definitely something to be said for just getting your fingers on the keyboard, writing and just making something happen, because nothing will unless you put those wheels into motion.
And the beauty of it is, even more you're not successful, anything you earn is extra money, and I think most people would like a bit of extra money. So say you're only earning £300-400 a month, that's a good pay rise. And once you write the book once, it's out there forever, earning you a bit of money. So yeah, I mean, I just, if you want to be an author, do it for the pure joy of doing it. And if you earn any money, then that's, it's money. It's however much it is, it's extra money. And all you really need to concentrate on is just doing better than yourself previously. You don't compete with anybody else. You don't think about a certain amount of money you need to earn. You just go, right, last month I earned 14 quid. This month I earned 30. I've doubled it, 30 quid more than nothing, but you've improved, you've gotten better. And that's what you need to do with this business. Like any business, is you just got to try and keep making the business better and keep collecting customers and then keeping those customers. And that isn't an overnight thing, and while it almost was in 2011 for me and many other authors, it's like any other business. If you want to be a dog groomer, you're not going to be rich overnight. You need to advertise, you need to find the clients, and you also need to do good dog grooming with the clients you do get, and it's the same with any business. So write a book and then just concentrate on making either that book better or your next book better, and you just go from there, and you just try and improve on yourself, and eventually you'll reach some point that you never thought you would.
You've mentioned mailing lists a couple of times. Obviously that's a very, very vital part of your entire business. What are you currently employing in terms of how you're recruiting people onto your mailing list at the minute? What are your big inputs?
The most important thing I think is the reader magnet, because you've got to entice people to sign up, and that can be easy or hard based on whether people like you or not already. But obviously if you're just starting out, then it can be more difficult. If you've only got one novel, then you don't necessarily want to give that novel away for free. But what I would say is, if you are a new author and you've released one novel, then start on your second novel and get that one out, and then give your first book away for free. And that might seem crazy, but at that point in your career, it's all about gathering supporters, because that's, if you get to a critical mass where people are promoting you for free, they're telling people how great you are, and they're telling their family, which happens a lot. You reach that critical mass, and then kind of your business takes off on its own. So early on, you don't think about the money, think about the amount of sort of readers you've got and fans. And later on, if you're in a position like me, you can afford to give away 5 novels, because I need to update my biography, but I've got over 30 novels now. So me giving away 5 novels might seem insane to some people, but for me, it's a great incentive for people to try my work if they haven't already, because they can really see whether they like my stuff. And if they do, great, because I've got another 25 novels written right now and another hopefully 40, 50 years of life to write more. So I think your reader magnet, make it as strong as can possibly be. And if you've only got one novel, then maybe create a short story or something just for the reader magnet, but make it really worthwhile for people to sign up, because, and I've known authors get this wrong and feel like people on their mailing list owe them something, that they've had these free books and now you're mine. But your readers never owe you anything. And if you think they do, then you're going to have a wake-up call. So you always need to be doing things for your readers. You need to give them as much value as you can. And if you do that, then off their own back, they'll help you, they'll buy your future books, they'll promote you. But you can never demand anybody do it. The most you can do is politely ask, and even that sometimes is too much. So you just have to think, and you have to appreciate the fact that without your readers, then there's no author career, there's no way of having one without them. So you should always be grateful to your readers, because they can go and pick up a book from somebody else, but you can't make a living without them. So give as much value as you can to people on your mailing list, and appreciate them for what they are. They're putting food on your table, and for me, they've literally put the roof over my head, so I never forget that, which is why I try to look after the ones that have looked after me, and if I can do a freebie or something like that, then I'll do it. I think it's automation's obviously really important as well, because if you're serious about a mailing list and you are adding people constantly, the last thing you want to be doing is having to reply to emails individually and handing over books and stuff. So you need to set up some sort of automation, and that's a learning process in itself, and doesn't come easily if you're not technical minded, but that's a key part of it. But for me, I have call to actions at the end of all my books. I have an advert with an image saying that you can get free books if you go to this link. People can click on it and get the book straight away. So that's the main organic way that I get mailing list sign-ups. People buy one of my books, they get to the end, they see the offer, they sign up. But I do sometimes spend about 25 quid a day on Facebook ads as well, sending people to a landing page. I did used to use Facebook lead gen ads, which automatically adds people to your mailing list, but I found that the quality, you probably found that out of every 3 subscribers, only one of them really opened your emails, whereas with a landing page, you might get less people signing up, but you find about 50% of them are genuine sort of sign-ups.
That's so key, yeah.
So, set up a landing page and send as many people to it as you can. You can do that for free just by posting on Facebook or mentioning it wherever you can, mention it in your email signatures and things, and put it on a business card, leave your business card everywhere. There's free ways you can do that. And then if you've got a bit of money, especially if you're starting out, if you're earning 50 quid a month in sales, maybe put 25 quid a month on it, just on a little ad that's spending, quid a day, just to add a couple of people a day, because you want that positive momentum always. You always want something to be happening. You always want something to be growing. I don't spend too much on mailing lists because I do get a lot of organic sort of sign-ups, and I also feel that with the amount of books I've got, I can spend that money on advertising a book, and I'll get the sign-up incidentally when they get to an advert at the end, or things like that. So for me, I get more bang for my buck by actually promoting books and trying to get people to buy them. But definitely starting out when you don't have 30 books on sale, concentrating you sort of your spare funds on signing up mailing list subscribers is probably a pretty smart thing to do.
We are unfortunately coming up to time, but I do have one main question before we go into the quick fire round, which is, why do you, Iain Rob Wright, write?
What do I write?
Why do you write?
Why do I write? I don't know, really. I would say the same. They don't really know why. I mean, for the same reason that I love to read and watch films and play video games, I like to escape. I like escapism. I like to fantasize. I like to daydream. And I love being involved, in my work life in that as well. I relax by escaping into sort of these fictional worlds, and I made my day job the same thing, so I get to enjoy, all my life. And I think it's just something I always wanted to do as a child, and somebody that becomes an Olympic sprinter, that's something in them that they want to do that. It's something, I think it's part of the human condition, and that we've always told stories. And some personality types just have this burning desire to kind of create, and some people might paint, and some people might play the piano. But, for me, I love to read, I love stories, I love characters. So I just I wanted to do what I love for my job, and that's what I do.
Beautiful, well put. Okay, so into the quick fire round now, which is 10 questions. I'm going to throw at you as quickly as possible. You can say pass at any point, but we're going to try and go as fast as we can. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Do you prefer being hot or cold?
Cold.
What's your favourite TV show of all time?
Jesus. Angel, probably.
When was the last time you sneezed?
Yesterday.
What's your favourite type of monster or demon?
Ooh, I like gins.
Nice. Do you believe in ghosts?
No.
Are you right or left-handed?
Right.
When was the last time you scared yourself with your writing?
Never.
You get given £10,000, no strings attached. What do you do with it?
Pay it off the mortgage.
What's your favourite word?
Discombobulated.
Which 3 people do you thank in your Pulitzer Prize-winning speech?
My wife and my 2 children.
Beautiful. That's 10 questions. One bonus question is, where can my listeners find out everything about you and all that you're working on?
IainRobWright.com will generally tell you what I'm up to, but if you want news immediately as it comes out, then my mailing list is always the first people to know what's going on.
Beautiful. I'll drop some links to that in the show notes for anyone that wants to check that out. Iain, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really nice to catch up.
Been a pleasure. Thank you, Daniel.
No worries. And thank you everyone for listening, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Great Writer Share podcast. Next week, I'll be joined by podcasters and authors of gay romance fiction, Jeff Adams and Will Knaus. Don't forget you can get early access to every episode of the Great Writer Share podcast and the chance to ask upcoming guests any of your questions just by becoming a patron of the show. All you need to do is visit www.patreon.com/Great Writer Share and support the show for as little as $1 a month. One more time, that's www.patreon.com/Great Writer Share. Until next time.